Welcome to another video from AnsweringChristianObjections.com. We examine Christians' objections to God's law and search the Scriptures for biblically based, historically accurate answers. Are you ready? Let's go. This next objection comes to us from David H. in St. Louis, Missouri. David writes, Jesus declared all foods clean in Mark 7:19. Let's read the verse David's referencing. And he said to them, Are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that whatever goes into the man from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach, and is eliminated? Thus he declared all foods clean. That's Mark 7, verse 18 and 19 in the New American Standard Bible. David continues, With this first step, Jesus began dismantling the old law in favor of his new one. Thank you for writing, David. You were the first in a long list of people that wrote to us about this particular passage. We did some digging and found not one, not two, not 3, 4, or 5 problems with this objection. We found 8. We're going to start with the problem that occurs most often in these situations, context. If we go back to the beginning of chapter 7, we find that the context is Jesus' disciples eating bread with unwashed hands. They aren't eating ham sandwiches or shrimp cocktail. Certain man-made traditions declared foods unclean, even food that was normally approved by God, if it was eaten with unwashed hands. Jesus was declaring those traditions invalid. He wasn't speaking of God's commandments that made certain animals unsuitable for food. God's food laws were not even part of the conversation in Mark. The disciples were just eating bread with unwashed hands. Here's problem number 2. If Jesus had declared all foods clean, then he would be a false prophet. In Deuteronomy chapter 13, God provides the world with a test to determine if a prophet is true or false. If anyone counsels rebellion against God's commandments, then they are a false prophet and should be stoned to death. And we know that Jesus was not a false prophet. Third, if Jesus had declared all foods clean, then why didn't the unbelieving Jews who wanted to kill him simply make that charge against him? In Matthew chapter 26 and Mark chapter 14, we find his opponents trumping up false charges against him. Why didn't they just say, he declared all foods clean and is a false prophet for counseling rebellion against God's commands? It would have been an open and shut case with a death penalty as the required punishment. Why did they trump up false charges against him? Because those who heard him speak, even those who bitterly opposed him, never thought he counseled rebellion against the commandments. If even his enemies did not believe he sinned in this way, why would those who love him ever believe he did? Number 4, if Jesus had declared all foods clean, then he would have violated the commandment of not adding to or taking away from the law. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy 4:2 and Deuteronomy 12:32. Both of these passages make it a sin to add to or take away from the law. Had Christ sinned by declaring all foods clean and taking away from the law, he could never have been the sinless Redeemer of all humanity. Fifth, in Matthew 5, Jesus tells his disciples that whoever annuls one of the least of the commandments will be least in the kingdom of heaven. If Jesus had declared all foods clean, then he would not have only annulled the least of the commandment. He would have annulled 32 commandments and 2 entire chapters of the Bible. And yet he tells us, whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. We know for certain that Jesus will be greatest in the kingdom of heaven, so he could not have annulled even the least of the commandments. Sixth, if Jesus had declared all foods clean, then his disciples were completely unaware of it. Peter was shocked by the vision in Acts 10, even suggesting that he eat anything unclean. And Paul, near the end of his life and his ministry, declared that he had committed no offense against the law of the Jews and had done nothing against our people or the customs of our fathers. The disciples' lives testify to the fact that they never thought Jesus had annulled the food laws. Seventh, if Jesus had declared all foods clean, then he would have been a hypocrite. Just a few sentences earlier in Mark 7, he berates the Pharisees, telling them, You are experts at setting aside the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. That's Mark 7:9. How could he scold them if he was just about to turn around and do the same thing and set aside the commandments of God regarding food? He should have been agreeing with them instead. Here's number 8, the final problem with this objection. If Jesus had declared all foods clean, then why does Isaiah chapter 66, which describes the time of Christ's 1,000-year reign, include a declaration that those who eat swine's flesh, abominable things, and mice will come to an end altogether? It's because Jesus never declared all foods clean. Scripture says, objection overruled.